History has known many powerful kings, but there is one king whose story is so shocking that it still echoes across time. His name was Nebuchadnezzar II, the mighty ruler of the great empire of Babylon. Babylon was the wonder of the ancient world. Its massive walls towered over the land. Its palaces glittered with gold. Its streets were filled with wealth and power. People from distant nations traveled just to see the glory of the city. And above it all stood one man, King Nebuchadnezzar. He commanded armies that conquered kingdoms. Nations trembled when they heard his name. To many, he seemed unstoppable, a ruler whose power had no limits. But one night, something happened that shook the king to his core. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. Not an ordinary dream, but a terrifying vision. In the dream, he saw a giant tree rising from the earth. It grew taller and taller until its top touched the heavens. The whole world could see it. Its branches spread across the sky, its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit fed the nations. Birds nested in its branches, and animals rested beneath its shade. The tree looked eternal, unshakable. But suddenly, a messenger from heaven appeared. The voice thundered, "Cut down the tree, trim off its branches, strip away its leaves, scatter its fruit." In an instant, the mighty tree was brought crashing down. King Nebuchadnezzar woke up in fear. What could this mean? Why would such a powerful tree be destroyed? But what the king did not yet understand was this. The dream was not about a tree. It was about him. And soon, the most powerful king in the world would experience something no ruler had ever imagined. A king would lose his mind, and the ruler of the greatest empire on earth would live like a wild animal. Morning came, but peace did not return to the palace of Nebuchadnezzar II. The king sat on his throne in the magnificent halls of Babylon, but his mind was restless. The dream from the night before refused to leave him. The image of the towering tree, the heavenly messenger, the command to cut it down, it all felt too real to ignore. Nebuchadnezzar knew this was no ordinary dream. So he did what kings often did in times of mystery. He summoned the wisest men in his kingdom. Soon the royal court filled with astrologers, magicians, and scholars. These men claimed to understand the secrets of the stars, the whispers of the gods, and the hidden meanings behind dreams. The king spoke with urgency. "I had a dream," he said, "a dream that troubles my spirit. Tell me what it means." He described the giant tree that touched the heavens. He told them about the birds that lived in its branches and the animals that found shelter beneath it. Then he spoke of the heavenly messenger who commanded the tree to be cut down. The room fell silent. The wise men looked at one another. They had heard the dream clearly, but none of them dared to speak, because deep inside, they sensed that this dream carried a message far greater than they could explain. Minutes passed, then more silence. Finally, the truth became clear. Not one of them could interpret the dream. The greatest scholars of Babylon stood speechless before their king. Nebuchadnezzar's frustration grew. This was not the first time his wise men had failed him. In the past, there had been only one man who could reveal the mysteries that others could not. A man known for wisdom that did not come from Babylon. A man who served the God of heaven. So the king sent for him. His name was Daniel. When Daniel entered the royal court, the atmosphere changed. Nebuchadnezzar trusted him more than any other advisor. Years earlier, Daniel had revealed another dream that no one else could explain. Now the king hoped he could do it again. Nebuchadnezzar looked at Daniel and said, "Daniel, I know the spirit of the holy God is in you. No mystery is too difficult for you. Tell me what my dream means." Daniel listened carefully as the king repeated every detail. But as Daniel began to understand the meaning, his heart sank, because the dream carried a message the king might not want to hear. When Daniel finished listening to the dream, he did not speak immediately. The room grew quiet. Daniel stood before the throne of Nebuchadnezzar II, but his face had changed. He looked troubled, deeply troubled. For a moment, he remained silent. The king noticed it. "Daniel," Nebuchadnezzar said, "do not let the dream or its meaning frighten you. Tell me what it means." Daniel took a deep breath. He knew the truth he was about to reveal would shake the most powerful man on earth. "Your Majesty," Daniel began carefully, "I wish that this dream were about your enemies, and its meaning about those who hate you." The king leaned forward. "But the tree you saw," Daniel continued, "is you." The court fell silent. Daniel explained the vision piece by piece. The great tree that grew strong and tall until it reached the heavens represented the greatness of the king. Nebuchadnezzar's power had grown across the earth. Nations depended on him. Kingdoms lived under the shadow of his authority. Just as birds nested in the branches of the tree and animals rested beneath it, many peoples and lands lived under the rule of Babylon. The king's greatness had become known across the world. But then Daniel spoke about the most frightening part of the dream. The messenger you saw coming down from heaven, Daniel said, was bringing a decree from God. A command had been given. The tree would be cut down. Its branches would be removed. Its glory would disappear. Daniel looked directly at the king. This means that you will be driven away from people. You will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle, and the dew of heaven will fall on you. The words echoed through the palace. You will remain like this for 7 years, until you acknowledge that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he chooses. No one moved. No one breathed. The prophecy was unbelievable. The most powerful king in the world, living like an animal? It sounded impossible. But Daniel was not finished. He pointed out one final detail of the dream. The stump of the tree that remained in the ground, he said, means your kingdom will be restored to you, after you recognize that heaven rules. Then Daniel made one final plea. Your Majesty, please accept my advice. Turn away from your pride. Stop doing evil. Show mercy to the oppressed. Perhaps then your prosperity will continue. The entire court waited for the king's reaction. Would Nebuchadnezzar listen? Or would the warning from heaven be ignored? For a moment after Daniel finished speaking, the royal court of Babylon remained completely silent. The warning had been clear. The dream was not just a strange vision. It was a message from heaven, a warning to the most powerful man alive. Nebuchadnezzar too had been given a choice. He could humble himself, change his ways, and acknowledge that his power ultimately came from God. Or he could continue in pride. For a time, it seemed as though the king remembered the warning. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Life in Babylon continued as usual. The empire remained strong. The armies were victorious. The wealth of nations continued to flow into the city. Nothing seemed to change. Gradually, the terrifying dream faded from the king's mind. A full year passed. One evening, Nebuchadnezzar walked along the roof of his royal palace. From that high place, he could see the entire city of Babylon stretching before him. It was a breathtaking sight. The massive walls of the city stood like mountains of stone. The gates were decorated with brilliant colors and shining images. Palaces rose toward the sky. Temples glittered in the fading sunlight. Below him were the famous gardens that many believed to be one of the wonders of the world, lush green terraces rising above the desert. The city looked invincible. The king slowly looked over everything he had built, and in that moment, pride filled his heart. Nebuchadnezzar spoke aloud, almost as if he were praising himself. Is this not the great Babylon that I have built as the royal residence, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? Those words had barely left his mouth when something extraordinary happened. A voice came from heaven. It was powerful, unmistakable, final. O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is declared, your royal authority has been taken away. The warning Daniel had spoken a year earlier had now become reality. You will be driven away from people. You will live with the animals of the field. You will eat grass like cattle. 7 years will pass until you acknowledge that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men. In that very moment, everything changed. The mighty king of Babylon, ruler of nations, conqueror of kingdoms, suddenly lost his mind. The prophecy had begun. The moment the voice from heaven finished speaking, the life of Nebuchadnezzar too changed forever. The powerful ruler who once commanded armies and controlled nations suddenly lost his sanity. One moment, he stood as the king of Babylon. The next moment his mind was gone. Confusion filled his thoughts. Fear replaced his authority. The king who once spoke with absolute confidence now wandered like a man who no longer understood the world around him. The palace guards watched in shock. The royal court did not know what to do. This was the ruler of the greatest empire on earth. Yet something had happened that no one could stop. Soon, the prophecy spoken by Daniel began to unfold exactly as it had been foretold. Nebuchadnezzar was removed from the palace. The man who once sat on a golden throne was driven away from the people of the city. The king who had once lived surrounded by luxury was now forced to live outside the walls, out in the open fields among the animals. Day after day, he wandered through the wilderness. His mind no longer functioned like a king's mind. He behaved like the creatures around him. Instead of eating rich food prepared by servants, he ate grass like cattle. The once mighty ruler now lived beneath the open sky. Rain fell on him. The cold night air surrounded him. The dew of heaven covered his body as he slept on the ground. As the months passed, his appearance changed dramatically. His hair grew long and wild, hanging like the feathers of an eagle. His fingernails became long and curved, like the claws of a bird. No crown rested on his head. No royal robes covered his body. The king who once ruled the world now looked like a creature from the wilderness. And this did not last for a few days, or even a few months. Year after year passed, 7 long years. During that time, the mighty empire of Babylon continued to exist, but its king remained absent, wandering in madness. It was a living reminder of a powerful truth. Human power may seem unstoppable, but heaven still rules over the kingdoms of the earth. For 7 long years, the once great king wandered like a lost creature. The man who had ruled nations, who had commanded armies, who had built the magnificent empire of Babylon, now lived under the open sky. Rain fell on him. The sun burned over him during the day, and cold winds passed through the night. His hair had grown long and tangled. His nails had become thick and curved. His body looked nothing like the powerful ruler the world once feared. Yet the words spoken by Daniel had promised something remarkable. The kingdom would return after the king learned one lesson. That lesson was simple, but it was the hardest truth for a proud ruler to accept. Heaven rules. For years, the mind of Nebuchadnezzar II remained lost in darkness. But then, one day, something extraordinary happened. The Bible describes it in a simple but powerful moment. At the end of that time, Nebuchadnezzar looked up. After years of wandering, after years of humiliation, after years of living like an animal, the king finally lifted his eyes toward heaven. And in that moment, his understanding returned. His mind cleared. His memory came back. For the first time in 7 years, the king remembered who he was. But more importantly, he finally understood who God was. Nebuchadnezzar began to speak, not with pride, but with humility. He praised the God of heaven. He acknowledged that the Most High rules forever, that his kingdom lasts through every generation, and that all the power of earthly rulers exists only because God allows it. The king who once glorified himself now glorified God. And the moment that happened, everything changed again. His sanity returned completely. Soon, the officials and leaders of Babylon came searching for him. When they saw that the king's mind had been restored, they brought him back to the palace. The throne that had once been lost was given back to him. Even more astonishing, the Bible says his greatness became greater than before. But Nebuchadnezzar was no longer the same man. The pride that once filled his heart had been replaced by humility. The king who once believed he ruled the world had finally learned the truth. There is a king above every king, and heaven rules over all. When the mind of Nebuchadnezzar II was restored, everything in his life looked the same on the outside, but inside, the king had become a completely different man. The officials of the empire brought him back into the palace of Babylon. The throne that once stood empty was now filled again. Royal garments were placed upon him. The crown returned to his head. But the greatest change was not his position. It was his heart. Years earlier, Nebuchadnezzar had stood on the roof of his palace and proudly declared that he had built Babylon by his own power and for his own glory. Now, the king spoke very different words. Instead of praising himself, he praised God. Nebuchadnezzar lifted his voice and made a declaration that would be remembered for generations. I praise and honor the King of heaven, because everything he does is right, and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. These words carried the weight of experience. This was not the speech of a philosopher or a priest. This was the testimony of a king who had once ruled the world, and then lost everything. Nebuchadnezzar had learned a lesson few rulers ever understand. Power can disappear in a moment. Wealth can fade. Empires can rise and fall. But the authority of God remains forever. The story of Nebuchadnezzar is not just about a king who lost his mind. It is a warning about pride. Throughout history, many leaders have believed that their success came only from their own strength. They trusted in their armies, their wealth, or their intelligence. Yet the story recorded in the book of Daniel reminds us of something deeper. The Most High rules over the kingdoms of the earth. And sometimes, when pride grows too large, heaven allows a fall, so that a person can finally look up. Nebuchadnezzar's story began with glory, passed through humiliation, and ended with humility. And that may be why this ancient king is remembered not only for the empire he built, but for the moment he finally understood who truly rules the world. The story of Nebuchadnezzar II is one of the most powerful lessons recorded in the book of Daniel. A king who once ruled the greatest empire on earth became a man who lived like an animal, not because his army failed, not because his enemies defeated him, but because pride blinded his heart. For 7 years he lost everything: power, dignity, and reason, until the day he finally lifted his eyes toward heaven. And in that moment, the king understood a truth that every generation must remember. Human power is temporary, but God's authority is eternal. The empire of Babylon eventually disappeared from history. Its walls crumbled, its palaces fell, but the lesson from Nebuchadnezzar's life still speaks today. Those who walk in pride may rise for a moment, but only the humble truly stand before God.